Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Chrisman. I am WIF's Director of Operations and Events. And today I am so excited to chat with Laura Neal, who is lead writer and executive producer of Killing Eve as part of our Laptop Cinema Club series. Thank you so much for joining us, Laura.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I want to just jump right in. Let's not waste any time.
Let's go for it.
Yes, there must have been a huge amount of pressure to wrap up the series in the right way. So without spoiling the final episodes, can you talk a little bit about how you work to wrap up key storylines and character arcs?
Yeah, I mean, a huge responsibility to end the show in a way that feels satisfying, especially considering the remarkable journeys that Eve and Villanelle have been on over 4 seasons. They start season 4 so different to how they started season 1. So we really wanted to honor what they have been through, both together and individually. And we spoke about the ending right from the beginning. We wanted to know where we were heading. So really early on in the writers' room, we were talking about where those characters were going to end up and what would feel most truthful for their final moments. And I think that was something we kept coming back to because we talked through like a bunch of different endings, like every conceivable ending, we spoke about it. And, we ran with, 5 or 6 really seriously. Not at the same time, I should add, but we went through 5 or 6 really seriously. And, each of them had their merits. But when we were deciding the sort of final one, we were focusing on what is the thing that feels really truthful for these characters, rather than just like what's the most fun or what's the most subversive or what's the thing we really want to see, like what are the moments that feel truthful for them. So that was really the focus, and all of the other conversations came from there.
Okay, great. I would venture to say that it's somewhat rare for a show to end on its own terms, right? It's like so many of them end without giving the audience a chance to say a proper goodbye to characters that they've grown to love. So knowing that season 4 was going to be the final season, were there any key considerations in addition to being truthful to the story, right? Were there any key considerations that you had in mind with regard to the characters and maybe even the audience? Like, what did you want audiences to take away from this final season?
I think knowing it was a final season, we just wanted to make sure that those relationships were explored as fully as we could explore them. So we had lots of questions ourselves about the relationship between Eve and Villanelle. What's the nature of the pull between these 2 women? Why are they magnetically drawn to each other? And, what are the roots of that? And so we really wanted to make sure that in this season we fully explored all the sort of possible reasons for that attraction. So that was one of the major things we wanted to do. We had specific questions for each of the different characters. For, say, Carolyn, for example, I was curious as to what Carolyn would be like if you stripped her of her status and you stripped her of her means of power. What does Carolyn look like when all of those things are taken away from her? So that was, a question that we had for her. And then, same with Constantine, really. What does Constantine look like if he starts to think, perhaps this isn't the life I should have chosen, perhaps there was a different route for me, and what would my life have looked like if I hadn't have made the decisions I made early on? So we had sort of individual ones, but the overarching one was, let's explore this relationship as fully as we can do, and let's give the audience that, and also give us that as writers, allow us to explore it too.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my goodness. When you were putting together a writing room for a show like Killing Eve, what kind of people are you looking for? Like, what kind of sensibility is important for working as a team in that space, and also doing the most interesting work on a show that's so particular like Killing Eve?
I think the tone of Killing Eve is really particular and quite tricky to get right at times. The sort of Phoebe Waller-Bridge voice, that she set up in season 1, the sort of mix of comedy and drama, and the darkness of the tone, but the lightness of touch is quite a difficult line to walk, I think. So first and foremost, I think we were looking for writers that could embrace that tone, And I mean, really quite a lot of the writers in the room are first and foremost comedy writers, who can do drama, which I think sometimes surprises people. So that was the sort of the main thing we were looking for, and also just people who are huge fans of the show, you know, and people who were as invested in those characters as I have been, and people who loved it and cherished it and really wanted to hold that, you know, for the rest of the season, and who were as passionate about ending it in the right way as I was.
I love that. I'm curious about, you said a lot of the writers are firstly comedy writers and
Mm-hmm.
that can do drama. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like so many times people try to put you in one box and, you know, it's like, no, I can do comedy and drama. And so the show is like a really great example of being able to blend both worlds and do it successfully.
I
So I
think
love
so,
that.
yeah. And I mean, that's part of the challenge of the show as well, is there's sometimes a temptation, I suppose, when you're writing it, especially when you're writing for characters like Villanelle or, you know, actors like Fiona Shaw, to give them great gags and to have those sort of comedy moments. And I especially am tempted with that. And I have to pull myself back sometimes from being too ridiculous with it, because that's also not the show. Like, it isn't a gag-based show. It has the humor, but it's always character first. So we do have to remind ourselves of that sometimes. Like, I had some really ridiculous ideas going through. I was obsessed with the idea of Villanelle running a pub quiz team for ages. I was like, this will be the story of episodes 1, 2, and 3. I was like, Villanelle will run this pub quiz team and she'll be so good at it because she's got all of these skills from being an assassin. And thank God someone was like, do you really think she should be doing that for a whole 3 episodes? And I was like, maybe we'll look at that again.
Maybe not. I'm curious okay, so when you have these like great ideas, but you know that they don't necessarily have a place in a certain episode or a certain season, what do you do with those ideas?
We write them down, we discuss them, we write them down, and sometimes we come back to them. Like, we sort of had this sort of saying when we were doing the writers' room, like, no good idea left behind. Like, you know, any good idea that we had, maybe it wouldn't fit in the episode we thought it was going to fit in, but no, these things have a way of resurfacing, or when you can repurpose them for something else later on. So in fact, a lot of the things we discussed really early in the writers' room were things that we came back to really late in the writers' room. You know, like, things we were talking about in the first couple of weeks were things that we were then talking about, you know, 3.5 months in. So that was really interesting to see.
Okay, great. One of the things that makes Killing Eve so special is its strong female voice and perspective. So can you talk a little bit about how you built on that foundation in season 4?
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that drew me to the show originally as well. You know, I love writing female characters. I love watching them on TV. And I think Killing Eve is so unique because it has these female characters acting in ways that we haven't seen female characters act before. So we just wanted to really preserve that element of the show in season 4, and, like you say, to build on it. And I think one of the really important things for Villanelle, for example, is that she is somebody who is so aspirational as an audience member to watch, because she's someone who behaves without fear and without shame. And I think that feels very liberating for a female audience, for audiences generally, but I think especially for a female audience. So we wanted to return Villanelle to her sort of like love of killing in season 4. And I know that sounds strange in terms of like talking about, you know, female emancipation and things like that, but it felt really important that Villanelle take pleasure in stuff again, because I think, you know, she's been through such a hard time over the seasons. We wanted to take her right back down to the bottom and then build her back up again. So we were like, it's so fun as an audience member to watch Villanelle enjoying not just killing, but enjoying fashion or enjoying food, for example. So those were things we really wanted to see in season 4. And then for Eve, we wanted to have her fully embrace the sort of darker elements of her psyche, and to, I guess, embrace the Villanelle inside of her, and for her to act without fear of judgment or without fear of what society was going to think of her. So we kind of liberated Eve from any kind of societal ties, I suppose, in terms of her behaviour, and we just sort of ran with her and that journey, which was really exciting. And then likewise with Carolyn, some of the things we were talking about with her was, you know, how women, especially women who are mothers, are judged in terms of, you know, their priorities. You know, what do they put first in their lives? Their children, their careers, all of these things. So with Carolyn, we were really interested, like, well, actually, Carolyn's priority has always been the game of spying. That's the thing she loves. That's the thing she wants to return to. And actually part of the journey we see her go on in season 4 is accepting that that's her priority, and accepting that the other things in her life just aren't as important as that one thing.
I feel like sometimes that's hard for women to admit, right? It's like, my job is very important to me, or this aspect of my life is very important, and it's not, you know, the husband or the kids or anything like that. So I think that's
Yeah,
really
totally.
fascinating. Yeah.
I think there's a real pressure on women generally, but especially women with children, to be selfless. And Killing Eve is a show where we see women acting selfishly. And I think that's shocking sometimes, but that's also part of the appeal.
Right, right. Well, you worked in the writer's room for season 3, and then took over as showrunner for season 4. So what were some challenges you faced during filming that you hadn't anticipated, and how did you adapt to that?
COVID. COVID was the big one.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's an expected answer, but it's the truth. We started the writers' room 2 weeks before the UK went into lockdown. So the first challenge was transitioning into a virtual writers' room from an in-person writers' room. We were lucky to have those 2 weeks, actually. I think that was really important in terms of establishing a dynamic in the room. But it was tricky going onto Zoom for all that time. You know, it's hard to visualize the series, it's hard to maintain energy levels. You know, it's much harder to do 8 hours over the internet than it is to do 8 hours in person. So that was a big creative challenge early on. And then later we had production challenges. So, you know, we had to push the shoot by, I think it was a year in the end. I think we pushed it by a year.
Oh, wow.
And so everyone's been very patient waiting for it. And I'm very appreciative of that. In some senses, it was really tough because, you know, the stamina required to write it suddenly went from sort of this to this. And in other ways, it was a blessing because we had more time to make sure we were exploring everything we wanted to explore. You know, we didn't stop working, we just carried on talking, we carried on rewriting. We replotted quite a lot of things. We started from scratch on some storylines. We had to rewrite some things in order to be able to film them because of COVID. So that was probably the biggest challenge. I mean, it was incredible seeing the crew and the heads of department come together and try and solve some of those production problems. And they did such an incredible job. I mean, I'm absolutely in awe of them for what they achieved, because I don't think when you watch the show, you realize that it was filmed in COVID, which is the thing we wanted to achieve. And, you know, they made Cuba in Margate, which I just think is absolutely amazing. Margate's a very small seaside town in the UK, and they managed to make it look like Cuba, which I just think is such a win for the crew and the production team.
Yeah, that's amazing. I would imagine it would be especially challenging as the showrunner to have these, you know, elements be pushed for so long. I'm curious, what were some leadership things that you did as the showrunner to make sure that the train stayed on track during, you know, the shutdown?
I think having a schedule for the writers' room really helped. You know, I think part of how we stayed on track was about planning and keeping a sort of sense of structure, even as the writers' room sort of elongated and, you know, things had to be stripped back and planned again. I think just sort of me knowing what we needed to achieve week by week was really helpful. I think, you know, try and keep morale up, you know, in a difficult time in people's personal lives as well. You know, everyone's struggled for various different reasons, some people much more than others during this time. So I think it's about being extra aware of people's emotions and, you know, their extra responsibilities outside of work. So we had a really strong writing team, and I had a great support team as well, myself, and we all really sort of bandied together, you know, in that sort of extra time we were working on the show through the pandemic, to just check that everyone was all right. So they're probably the two major things. I suppose there's lots of tiny things each day that you try and do to make the process smoother. But we were also learning as we went, you know, and I think we had to create more space for people to make mistakes because it was such an extraordinary time.
Yeah, wow. I love that you talked about like sort of making sure that there was an ecosystem of care and empathy and making sure that people were okay during that time. That's important. One of the notable things about Killing Eve is the way that show running torch was passed from one incredible woman to another. So as you look back on the fourth and final season, is there anything that you brought to the show that you can say, yes, this is quintessentially my style, I did this?
Well, I love that each different season of Killing Eve has like its own flavour, and I think that's such a unique aspect of the show, and something that's really joyful actually. Like, I love going through and watching, and obviously I've seen every season hundreds of times, and I love the sort of transition between, you know, Phoebe's voice, Emerald's voice, Suzanne's voice. I think if I was going to step back and say what feels quintessentially Laura Neal, maybe the surreal aspects of season 4. I think you can see that in episodes 1 and 2. The vision that Villanelle sees is probably quite telling of my voice and the things that I find funny and the things that I'm interested in. I think there's a real, I enjoy those sort of darkly comic moments. I think that's common for all of the showrunners of Killing Eve, but one of the favourite things I wrote in the show, you know, as a whole, and it was in season 3, was the baby in the bin in season 3, and I think that sort of speaks to my sense of humour as well.
So was showrunning always a goal of yours? And if so, how did you shape and train yourself for that responsibility?
Not really. I mean, I've always wanted to, you know, since I was a teenager, I wanted to write. Started out in theatre and then went into TV from that. You know, we don't have a showrunner model really here in the UK, so it's not something that when I was first starting out in the industry, I was really aware of. As I started to work more in, I guess, sort of British style mini rooms, I guess you guys would call them, I knew that model excited me, and I knew that I liked the sort of writer's room system. I knew that I liked being in a room with other writers, collaborating in that way. So that's when I sort of started to think about show running as a possible future avenue for me. And then I'd done some rooms over here. I'd worked on sex education in a writer's room, and I'd done a couple of other ones as well. And then I was like, I want to experience a US writer's room. So went over to the States and I worked on a great Netflix show called Daybreak, which I really, really loved. And that was my first taste of I guess, the US writer's room system. And then being asked to run Killing Eve, you know, came as a surprise, really. I mean, a good one. I was really excited to take it on, but it wasn't something I knew was coming. So I sort of became a lead writer quicker than I might have imagined, but I'm absolutely delighted that it happened, and it feels somewhere where I feel really comfortable, and definitely somewhere I want to stay.
Okay, great. I'm curious, can you back up a little bit? So you talked about you started in theater. Maybe if you can just expand on your career trajectory and sort of how you got to where you are today. So you talked about mini rooms and then Daybreak, but what happened in between, in those moments in between?
Lots of waitressing. But I started writing plays as a teenager. I did the Young Writers Programme at the Royal Court, which is a theatre here in London, which cultivates lots of brilliant theatre writers. And I'd found that really inspiring. And then I'd gone to university and studied drama there. and had written a play that got seen by some TV producers, and they were working on Secret Diary of a Call Girl at the time, the Billie Piper show. And that was my first TV job. And, you know, they had I think it was a 2-week room, which I think was very unusual at that time. And I know that sounds tiny, but for us, that seems like a luxury. So I did that, and that was the start of my TV work. And then, you know, lots of other jobs on the side, trying to make ends meet for a while. And then, you know, gradually got more of a foothold in the industry, built up those sort of room experiences, you know, up to the point where I did, sex education probably was the biggest room that I'd done over here.
Okay, great. Let's see. So for our members that are looking to model their careers after yours, what advice would you give them?
I'm sure everybody says this, but just keep going. Like, keep plugging away as much as you can. I know it's so hard, and, you know, it's hard to earn a living as a writer early on, and, you know, I feel really lucky to be able to now. But I think the key is just keep producing scripts. And I think I had lots of different spec scripts of demonstrating lots of different parts of lots of different genres, I suppose, lots of different parts of things I liked to write, lots of different tones, all of which sort of felt comfortable for me, that I could send to different producers to kind of demonstrate my range. I think that was really helpful. And then just meeting everyone that you can meet, because you never know who it's going to be that you make a connection with, who it's going to be that you end up being, you know, given work by, and, you know, just keep going. That's honestly the best advice I can give.
I love that. I love that. And you talked about having range, right? So like Killing Eve is the perfect summary of, you know, having range, right? You have comedy, you have drama, and your scripts, your spec scripts and previous work has shown that you can do multiple things. And I feel like that's important in this business right now, right? Yeah. So my last question for you is, what's next? What are you excited about? What are you going to be doing now that the show is over?
I'm going to take a big holiday.
I bet.
I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and I'm going to enjoy, you know, Killing Eve being out there in the world finally after 2 years of working on it. And then I'm looking to my next projects. I've got a couple of things that are bubbling away, some things that I started prior to doing Killing Eve that people have been waiting very patiently on, that I need to finish. I've got a half-hour superhero dark comedy drama that I'm really excited by, and I've got a couple of other ideas that I'm working up. And I just want to be writing, you know, female-led, darkly comic, character-driven shows. That's what I want to be doing, really. So, well, Killing Eve, but different.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to see all that is coming. And I'm excited to see the rest of the season of Killing Eve. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. And I just look forward to seeing the rest of the season.
Oh, thanks so much, Ashley. It's been so fun speaking with you.